Do you ever wonder what is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number? The traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community. A community not part of the mainstream, unconventional, peripheral, or extreme. Part of an anthology, a published collection of poems or other pieces of writing. This is Esoteric Lore. I'm your host, Edward Aponte, where I push you to ponder the fringes of folklore. By the time we're 25 years of age, the brain's transformation from childhood to adolescence are finally over. Or is it? All the experiences in your life, from single conversations to your broader culture, shape the microscopic details of your brain. Nearly speaking, who you are depends on where you've been. Your brain is a relentless shape shifter, constantly rewiring its own circuitry. And because your experiences are unique, so are the vast, detailed patterns of your neural networks. Because they continue to change your whole life. Your identity is a moving target. It never reaches an endpoint. This following episode is sourced from David Eagleman's book, The Brain, The Story of You. Dr. Eagleman writes, and I quote, "Although neuroscience is my daily routine, I'm still in awe every time I hold a human brain. After you take into account its substantial weight, an adult brain weighs in at 3 pounds, its strange consistency like firm jelly, and its wrinkled appearance, deep valleys carving a puffy landscape. What's striking is the brain's sheer physicality. This hunk of unremarkable stuff seems at odds with the mental process it creates. Our thoughts and our dreams, our memories and experiences all rise from this strange neural material. Who we are is found within its intricate firing patterns of electrochemical pulses. When the activity stops, so do you. When that activity changes character due to injury or drugs, you change character in lockstep. Unlike any other part of your body, if you damage a small piece of the brain, who you are is likely to change radically. To understand how this is possible, let's start at the beginning. At birth, we humans are helpless. We spend about a year unable to walk, about 2 more before we can articulate full thoughts, and many more years unable to fend for ourselves. We are totally dependent on those around us for our survival. Now compare this to many other mammals. Dolphins, for instance, are born swimming. Giraffes learn to stand within hours. A baby zebra can run within 45 minutes of birth. Across the animal kingdom, our cousins are strikingly independent sooner after they're born. On the face of it, that seems like a great advantage for other species, but in fact, it signifies a limitation. Baby animals develop quickly because their brains are wiring up according to a largely pre-programmed routine. But that preparedness trades off with flexibility. Imagine if some hapless rhinoceros found itself on the Arctic tundra, or on top of a mountain in the Himalayas, or in the middle of urban Tokyo. It would have no capacity to adapt, which is why we don't find rhinos in those areas. This strategy of arriving with a prearranged brain works inside a particular niche in the ecosystem. But put an animal outside of that niche, and its chances of thriving are low. In contrast, humans are able to thrive in many different environments, from the frozen tundra to the high mountains to bustling urban centers. This is possible because the human brain is born remarkably unfinished. Instead of arriving with everything wired up, let's call it hardwired, a human brain allows itself to be shaped by the details of life experience. This leads to long periods of helplessness as the young brain slowly molds to its environment. It's live wired. What's the secret behind the flexibility of young brains? It's not about growing new cells. In fact, the number of brain cells is the same in children and adults. Instead, the secret lies in how those cells are connected. At birth, a baby's neurons are disparate and unconnected. And in the first 2 years of life, they begin connecting up extremely rapidly as they take in sensory information. As many as 2 million new connections, or synapses, are formed every second in an infant's brain. By the age of 2, a child has over 100 trillion synapses, double the number an adult has. It has now reached a peak and has far more connections that it will need. At this point, the blooming of a new connection is supplanted by a strategy of neural pruning. As you mature, 50% of your synapses will be pared back. Which synapses stay and which go. When a synapse successfully participates in a circuit, it is strengthened. In contrast, synapses weaken if they aren't useful, and eventually they are eliminated. Just like paths in a forest, you lose the connection that you don't use. In a sense, the process of becoming who you are is defined by carving back the possibilities that were already present. You become who you are not because of what grows in your brain, but because of what is removed. Throughout our childhoods, our local environments refine our brain, taking the jungle of possibilities and shaping it back to correspond to what we're exposed to. Our brains form fewer but stronger connections. As an example, the language that you're exposed to in infancy, say English versus Japanese, refines your ability to hear the particular sounds of your language and worsens your capacity to hear the sounds of other languages. That is, a baby born in Japan and a baby born in America can hear and respond to all the sounds in both languages. Throughout time, the baby raised in Japan will lose the ability to distinguish between, say, the sounds of R and L, two sounds that aren't separated in Japanese. We are sculpted by the world we happen to drop into. Take, for example, Romania's orphanages. In 1966, to increase the population and the workforce, Romanian President Nicolae banned contraception and abortion. State gynecologists known as menstrual police examined women of childbearing age to ensure they were producing enough offsprings. A celibacy tax was levied on families who had fewer than 5 children. The birth rate skyrocketed. Many poor families couldn't afford to care for their children, and so they were given up over to state-run institutions. In turn, the state rolled out more institutions to meet the soaring numbers. By 1989, when President Nikolai was ousted, 170,000 abandoned children resided in institutions. Scientists soon revealed the consequences of an institutional upbringing on brain development, and those studies influenced government policy. Over the years, most of the Romanian orphans have been returned to their parents or removed to government foster care. By 2005, Romania made it illegal for children to be institutionalized before the age of 2, unless disabled. Millions of orphans still live in institutionalized government care around the world. Given the necessity of a nurturing environment for an infant's developing brain, it is imperative that governments find ways to get the children into conditions that allow for proper brain development. Without an environment with emotional care and cognitive stimulation, the human brain cannot develop normally. Only a couple of decades ago, it was thought the brain development was mostly complete by the end of childhood. But now we know that the process of building the human brain takes up to 25 years. The teen years are a period of such important neural reorganization and change that it dramatically affects who we seem to be. Hormones coursing around our bodies cause obvious physical changes as we take on the appearance of adults, but out of sight, our brains are undergoing equally monumental changes. These changes profoundly color how we behave and react to the world around us. One of these changes has to do with an emerging sense of self, and with it, self-consciousness. Let me end this episode with a story. On August 1st, 1966, Charles Whitman took an elevator to the observation deck of the University of Texas Tower in Austin. Then the 25-year-old started firing indiscriminately at people below. 13 people were killed and 33 wounded, until Whitman himself was finally shot dead by police. When they got to his house, they discovered that he had killed his wife and mother the night before. There was only one thing more surprising than this random act of violence: the fact that the lack of anything about Charles Whitman that would seem to have predicted it. He was an Eagle Scout. He was employed as a bank teller. He was an engineering student. Shortly after killing his wife and his mother, he'd sat down and typed what amounted to a suicide note. The suicide note reads, and I quote, "I don't really understand myself these days. I am supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent young man. However, lately, I cannot recall when it started, I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. After my death, I wish that an autopsy would be performed on me to see if there is any visible physical disorder." Whitman's request was granted. After an autopsy, the pathologist reported that Whitman had a small brain tumor. It was about the size of a nickel, and it was pressing against a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is involved in fear and aggression. This small amount of pressure on the amygdala led to a cascade of consequences in Whitman's brain, resulting in him taking action that would otherwise be completely out of character. His brain matter had been changing, and who he was changed with it. This is an extreme example, but less dramatic changes to your brain can alter the fabric of who you are. Consider the ingestion of drugs or alcohol. Particular kinds of epilepsies make people more religious. Parkinson's disease often makes people lose their faith, while the medication for Parkinson's can often turn people into compulsive gamblers. It's not just illness or chemicals that change us. From the movies we watch to the jobs we work, everything contributes to a continual reshaping of the neural networks we summarize as us. So, who exactly are you? Is there anyone down deep at the core? By the time we're 25 years of age, the brain's transformation of childhood and adolescence are finally over. The tectonic shifts in our identity and personality have ended, and our brain appears to now be fully developed. You might think that who you are as an adult is now fixed in place, immovable. But it's not. In adulthood, our brains continue to change, something that can be shaped and can hold that shape is what we describe as plastic. And so it is with the brain. Even in adulthood, experience changes it, and it retains the change. A quarter of a century. That's how long it takes for our brain to mature. But after the first 25, it's up to us to maintain this supercomputer we call our brain. And we do that by surrounding ourselves with healthy and well-balanced experiences and environments. Hardwired is how our brains and what our brains come into this world with. Live wiring is how and what we do to maintain our mental health. And that's up to us. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, and give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.